The crystalline spires of New Harmony rose like frozen music into the pale green sky, their surfaces reflecting the gentle light of the system's twin suns. For 300 years, the Melodian civilization had grown in peace, their cities singing with harmonic resonances that brought joy to every soul within their borders. They were a species of pure thought and emotion, beings whose entire existence revolved around creating beauty through sound, light, and mathematical precision. Ambassador Lyrinth stood at the apex of the central spire, her translucent form shimmering with distress patterns that would have been heartbreaking to any being capable of perceiving them. Through the vast crystalline windows, she could see the approaching darkness, a fleet of Ravager ships that moved through space like locusts through a grain field, consuming everything in their path. High resonance. The final evacuation transports have departed, reported Commander Velos, his harmonic voice cracking with strain. But our defensive grid won't hold them for more than a few hours. The Ravagers have broken through 7 star systems in the past month. Their hunger knows no bounds. Lyrinth's form flickered with patterns of deep sorrow. The Ravagers were a plague upon the galaxy, a species that consumed not just resources, but the very life force of worlds they conquered. They turned planets into barren husks, their inhabitants into drained corpses, leaving behind nothing but emptiness and silence. Entire civilizations had vanished beneath their advance, their art and culture snuffed out like candles in a cosmic wind. "Have there been any responses to our distress calls?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Centauri Federation sent their regrets, but their fleets are already engaged defending their own borders. The Vegan Alliance offered to accept refugees, but they cannot spare military vessels. The Council of Wisdom. They are debating the matter in their eternal Congress. Lyrinth closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her entire civilization pressing down upon her consciousness. The Melodians were builders and dreamers, philosophers and artists. They had never developed weapons of war because they had never needed them. Their entire society was built upon the principle that all conflicts could be resolved through harmony and understanding. The Ravagers did not understand harmony. They understood only hunger. "Continue broadcasting our distress signal on all frequencies," she commanded. "If there are any beings in this galaxy who still believe that beauty and knowledge are worth preserving, perhaps they will hear us." The transmission that went out from New Harmony was unlike any distress call ever sent. Rather than a simple request for military aid, it was a condensed encyclopedia of Melodian civilization. Their greatest songs compressed into mathematical formulae, their most beautiful artworks translated into light patterns, their entire philosophical framework encoded in harmonies that could touch the soul of any sentient being capable of receiving them. "This is New Harmony to any who can hear us," Lyrinth's voice carried across the void, accompanied by music so beautiful it could make stone weep. "We are the Melodians, and we are dying, not just our bodies, but our dreams, our songs, our hope for a future where beauty has meaning. If there is anyone out there who believes that art and music deserve to exist, if there is anyone who thinks that love and creativity are worth fighting for, please, help us. Not for conquest or resources or political advantage, but simply because some things in this universe should not be allowed to fade into darkness." The message spread through subspace like ripples on a pond, reaching across vast distances to touch the consciousness of thousands of species. Most heard it as simply another plea from another dying world, tragic, but not their responsibility. Others recorded it for historical archives, another example of civilization's fragility in the face of cosmic brutality. But in a small yellow star system that most galactic databases listed as caution, hazardous biosphere, something very different happened. Captain James Mitchell was finishing his morning coffee aboard the exploration vessel Times Pathfinder Times when the signal reached Earth's outer detection grid. He had been part of humanity's deep space reconnaissance program for 8 years, mapping systems and cataloging potentially habitable worlds for future colonization. It was quiet work, usually boring. Exactly the kind of assignment given to officers who had been deemed too reckless for more conventional postings. The coffee mug froze halfway to his lips as the Melodian distress call played through the ship's speakers. The music was unlike anything he had ever heard, haunting, beautiful, and desperate. in a way that spoke directly to something fundamental in human nature. By the time the transmission ended, every member of his crew had gathered on the bridge in stunned silence. "Sir," whispered communications specialist Lisa Park, tears streaming down her cheeks. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And they're all going to die." Mitchell set down his coffee cup with hands that weren't quite steady. In the transmission, he had heard something that reminded him of his daughter's laughter, of his wife's voice singing lullabies, of every perfect moment of joy and beauty he had ever experienced in his 35 years of life. "Patch me through to Fleet Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha." "Sir, we're 3 weeks out from Earth at best possible speed. By the time we could get authorization." "Just do it, Park." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Admiral Hayes in his office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The old man looked tired. The weight of commanding humanity's first interstellar fleet had aged him considerably in recent years. "Mitchell, this better be good. I'm in the middle of briefing the Colonial Council on the expansion into the Centauri system. Admiral, we've intercepted a distress call. A species called the Melodians are under attack by something called the Ravagers." "Sir, you need to hear this transmission." Hayes started to object, but something in Mitchell's voice made him pause. The distress call played through the command center's speakers, and Mitchell watched as the Admiral's expression shifted from bureaucratic impatience to something much more complex. When the transmission ended, Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus," he finally whispered. "How far out are they?" 2 weeks at maximum burn, sir. But Admiral, our orders are strictly reconnaissance. The Times, Pathfinder Times, isn't equipped for combat operations." "I wasn't talking about the Times Pathfinder *, Mitchell." Hayes leaned forward, his eyes holding a light that Mitchell had never seen before. "I was talking about the rest of the fleet. Sir, Captain, you're about to witness something that we've been preparing for since humanity first reached the stars. The possibility that someday we would encounter a species that needed our help." Hayes turned to someone off-screen. "Get me Fleet Admiral Rodriguez. Tell him to initiate Protocol 7. Mitchell felt his blood chill. Protocol 7 was theoretical, a contingency plan that most officers assumed would never be implemented. It called for the immediate mobilization of Earth's entire military fleet for operations beyond the solar system. "Admiral, Protocol 7 hasn't been tested. We don't even know if our ships can operate that far from Earth for extended periods." "Then I guess we're about to find out." Hayes turned back to face him. "Mitchell, I'm giving you a field promotion to Commodore and temporary command of Reconnaissance Squadron Alpha. Your mission is to reach the Melodian system and gather intelligence on these Ravagers. The rest of the fleet will follow as soon as we can organize the logistics. Sir, with respect, our entire fleet against an unknown enemy force? The risks." "The risks. The risks of what, Commodore?" "Of helping people who never did anything wrong, except create beauty in a universe that seems determined to stamp it out?" Hayes's voice hardened. "I've spent my entire life wondering what humanity would do when we finally met our neighbors among the stars. Would we be explorers or conquerors? Scientists or warriors? Well, I think we just got our answer." The transmission ended, leaving Mitchell staring at the blank screen. Around him, his crew waited in tense silence, understanding that they had just volunteered for something far beyond their original mission parameters. "Park, plot a course for the Melodian system. Maximum burn," he ordered, "and send a message to New Harmony. Tell them help is coming." "Sir, what should I tell them about our capabilities? Our weapons? Our numbers?" Mitchell looked out at the stars, thinking about the music he had just heard, and the desperate hope in Lyranth's voice. Somewhere out there, beings who had spent their entire existence creating beauty were about to be destroyed by creatures who knew only hunger and violence. "Tell them that Earth remembers what it's like to be afraid," he said quietly. "And tell them that we've spent our entire history learning what to do about it." As the Times Pathfinder Times began its burn toward the Melodian system, emergency signals were racing back to Earth at faster-than-light speeds, triggering mobilization protocols that had never been tested outside of simulations. In orbital shipyards around Earth and Mars, vessels that had been designed for exploration and defense were being hastily retrofitted for long-range combat operations. Aliens cried for help, the Deathworlders fleet arrived. In style, the Ravager hive mind, known as Consume All That Lives, stretched its consciousness across the approaching fleet, savoring the anticipation of another world's destruction. Through thousands of biomechanical ships, each one a living extension of its will, it could taste the fear radiating from the crystalline planet ahead. The Melodians' terror was particularly sweet. Their highly developed emotional centers made them exquisite sources of life energy. Brood Mother Sixthul, one of the Consume-All's most successful harvesters, piloted her massive bioship toward New Harmony's outer defenses. Her vessel was a grotesque fusion of organic tissue and corrupted technology, its hull pulsing with veins that carried the liquefied remains of previous conquests. Weapon pods that had once been living creatures opened along her flanks, preparing to feast on the defenders. The prey singers have been most generous, she communicated to her brood siblings through their shared neural link. Their distress calls have revealed the locations of 17 additional colonies in this sector. After we drain this world, we shall visit them all. The Melodian defense grid was pathetic by Ravager standards, elegant energy barriers designed to deflect asteroids and cosmic radiation, not the bioweapons of a species that had evolved specifically to consume other civilizations. The first wave of Ravager scouts tore through the outer perimeter like tissue paper, their acid spitters reducing the beautiful defensive platforms to slowly dissolving metal. On New Harmony's surface, the remaining Melodians huddled in their crystal sanctuaries, their harmonic communications filled with prayers to entities they weren't sure existed. Some sang songs of defiance, their voices joining in complex harmonies that would have been their masterpiece if anyone had lived to remember them. Ambassador Lyranth stood at her post in the central spire, watching the approaching darkness and feeling the last notes of hope fading from her heart. The evacuation ships had escaped with perhaps 10% of their population, but the rest, the artists, the philosophers, the children who would have grown up to create wonders, they would all become fuel for the Ravager's endless hunger. High resonance, Commander Velos reported, his harmonic voice now barely a whisper. Our long-range sensors are detecting something unusual. There appears to be a small vessel approaching from outside the system. It's broadcasting a response to our distress call. Lyranth's form flickered with hope so faint it was barely visible. Put it through. The transmission that filled the central spire was unlike anything they had ever heard. Where Melodian communication was music and harmony, this was harsh and direct, the voice carrying undertones of controlled violence that made their crystalline structures vibrate with sympathetic resonance. New Harmony, this is Commodore James Mitchell of the Terran vessel Times Pathfinder **. We received your distress call and are en route to your position. I know things look bad right now, but I need you to hold on for just a little longer. The cavalry is coming. And we're bringing friends. Terrans? Velos's harmonic patterns showed confusion. There is no record of this species in the galactic database. Before Lyranth could respond, their sensors detected something that defied explanation. Space itself seemed to be tearing open just beyond the system's outer planets, reality splitting apart like fabric under tremendous stress. What emerged from these tears made both the Melodians and the Ravagers pause in disbelief. The first ship to clear the artificial wormhole was clearly a scout vessel, sleek, small, and moving with a predatory grace that suggested it had been built for hunting rather than exploration. But it was what followed that truly captured everyone's attention. Dreadnoughts that stretched for kilometers through space, their hulls scarred by battles fought in distant systems. Carriers that disgorged swarms of fighters like angry insects from a hive. Support vessels that bristled with weapon systems that seemed to operate on principles that violated several fundamental laws of physics. And at the center of the formation, a command ship so massive that it created its own gravitational field, pulling nearby asteroids into orbit around its bulk. The Terran fleet numbered in the hundreds, each vessel bearing the scars and modifications that spoke of a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to fight and win. But more than their numbers or their technology, it was their formation that made the watching Ravagers feel something they had never experienced before: uncertainty. These ships moved like a pack of apex predators that had spotted wounded prey. There was no hesitation, no fear. No discussion of terms or negotiations. They simply formed up into attack formations and began their approach with the calm confidence of beings who had never met an enemy they couldn't kill. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Time's unconquered asterisk, her weathered hands gripping the command rail as she studied the tactical displays. At 62, she had overseen the design and construction of every ship in the fleet, preparing for the day when humanity would need to project force beyond their own solar system. She had never imagined that day would come so soon, or under such circumstances. "Report," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding the respect of the most dangerous military force in known space. "Ma'am, we've got approximately 300 Ravager bioships in various stages of attack formation," reported Captain Torres from the tactical station. "Their technology appears to be predominantly biological, but our sensors are detecting energy signatures that suggest they're more than just overgrown animals." "And the Melodians? Approximately 40,000 survivors on the planet's surface. Their defensive grid is down to 30% effectiveness. At current rates of engagement, they have maybe 6 hours before complete orbital bombardment becomes inevitable." Rodriguez nodded slowly, studying the enemy formation with the practiced eye of someone who had spent her career analyzing how to kill things efficiently. The Ravagers were spread out across the system, confident in their numerical superiority and their previous victories over civilizations that had never learned to fight back. They were about to learn the difference between conquering artists and facing warriors. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Engagement Protocol Delta 7. I want those bioships torn apart before they know what hit them. And patch me through to the Melodian survivors." The holographic display shifted to show Ambassador Lyranth's crystalline form, her harmonic patterns now showing a mixture of desperate hope and disbelief. "Admiral Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force," Elena said, her voice gentling slightly as she addressed the alien diplomat. "I understand your people have been having some trouble with uninvited guests. We're here to help with that problem." "Admiral, your fleet. How did you arrive so quickly? Our distress call was sent only days ago. And your system isn't even in our stellar cartography databases." Rodriguez smiled, the expression holding all the warmth of a mother and all the coldness of a professional killer. "Ma'am, we've been ready for this fight since before your species developed spaceflight. The only question was when it would find us." She turned back to her tactical officers. "All ships, weapons free. Show these things what 4 billion years of evolution looks like when it gets angry." The first exchange of fire was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ravager bioweapons that could dissolve the hulls of most known vessels splashed harmlessly against Terran shields that seemed to operate on principles beyond conventional physics. In return, the human fleet unleashed weapons that made the watching Melodians question their understanding of reality itself. Kinetic kill vehicles moving at significant fractions of light speed turned Ravager bioships into expanding clouds of organic matter. Directed energy weapons that could focus stellar-level energies into beams narrow enough to thread through needle eyes. And strangest of all, weapons that seemed to reach directly into the enemy ships and detonate their power sources from the inside. But it was the humans' tactical coordination that truly dominated the battle. Where the Ravagers fought as individuals driven by hunger, the Terran fleet moved like a single organism with hundreds of deadly limbs. Their formations flowed and shifted with a precision that spoke of countless hours of training and an understanding of warfare that went down to the molecular level. Broodmother Sixthul felt the first stirrings of fear as she watched her brood siblings die in flashes of nuclear fire. Her bioship's organic computers were struggling to process the tactical data these Terrans fought, with a combination of technological superiority and strategic brilliance that she had never encountered. "Consume all that lives," she transmitted to the hive mind. "These creatures, they do not fight like prey species. They hunt like apex predators." The response that came back through the neural link carried undertones of rage and confusion. "Impossible. All species serve either as food or as competition to be eliminated. These Terrans. What manner of world could produce such creatures?" The answer came in the form of a communication broadcast across all frequencies, delivered in the calm, professional tone of someone reading a weather report. "Attention Ravager vessels. This is Admiral Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force. You are currently engaged in the systematic destruction of a peaceful civilization, which Earth considers an act of genocide. You will cease all aggressive actions immediately and withdraw from this system, or we will be forced to demonstrate why evolution spent 4 billion years teaching humanity how to kill efficiently. The silence that followed was broken by Sixthal's transmitted response, her bioship's communication organs pulsing with indignation. You dare threaten the Ravager host? We have consumed civilizations across 1,000 systems. We are the ultimate predators of this galaxy. The human response was immediate and devastating. A single Terran dreadnought broke from the formation, its massive bulk accelerating towards Sixthal's position with impossible speed, its weapon systems charged with energy that made nearby space itself glow with radiation. Correction, Admiral Rodriguez's voice carried across the void with Arctic coldness. You were the ultimate predators. Now you're about to meet something that makes you look like vegetarians. Humanity was about to make its debut on the galactic stage, and they were going to do it in the most human way possible, by rushing headlong into a fight they couldn't win, for people they'd never met. Simply Becca number. Aliens cried for help. The Deathworlders fleet arrived. In style, the Terran dreadnought times, unstoppable times closed the distance to Broodmother Sixthal's bioship, in a display of tactical precision that defied every law of physics the Ravagers thought they understood. Its massive bulk moved through space like a predator closing on wounded prey, its weapon systems charging with energy that made the surrounding void glow with deadly radiation. Sixthal's organic vessel writhed in what the Ravagers considered fear, a sensation so alien to their species that they had no proper words for it. Her bioship's defensive weapons opened fire, launching streams of corrosive acid and swarms of explosive parasites that had torn through the hulls of countless civilizations. They splashed harmlessly against the human ship's shields like rain against a mountain. The Time's Unstoppable's time's response was surgical and devastating. A single kinetic penetrator, accelerated to 12% of light speed, punched through Sixthal's bioship from stem to stern. The Broodmother had just enough time to feel her vessel's death screams through their neural link before the secondary explosion vaporized everything within a 3-kilometer radius. Across the battlefield, the message was clear. The Ravagers were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. Admiral Rodriguez watched the tactical displays with the calm satisfaction of someone who had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. The Ravager fleet was breaking apart under the sustained assault from her ships, their biovessels dying in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire that lit up the darkness of space like newborn stars. "Ma'am, enemy casualties at 70% and climbing," reported Captain Torres. "They're attempting to disengage and retreat to the outer system." "Negative. Standard protocol for genocide is total elimination of the threat," Rodriguez replied, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone who had made similar decisions many times before. "Signal the hunter-killer squadrons. I want every last one of these things dead before they can report back to their homeworld." The next phase of the battle was less a fight than it was an extermination. Terran destroyer squadrons broke from the main formation, their smaller, faster ships pursuing the fleeing Ravagers with the relentless efficiency of wolves bringing down a wounded deer. Their weapons were designed for exactly this kind of pursuit, fast-firing railguns that could track and destroy targets across vast distances, and guided munitions that could chase their prey through hyperspace itself. The consume all that lives, experiencing individual death on a scale it had never imagined possible, made a decision that went against every instinct its species possessed. Through its remaining bioships, it broadcast a message on all frequencies, a formal surrender in the ancient galactic protocols that most civilizations used for ending conflicts. "Terran vessels, this is the Ravager host. We acknowledge your superior force and formally request cessation of hostilities under the Galactic Accord of." The response that came back was immediate and delivered in a tone that suggested Rodriguez had been expecting exactly this moment. "Negative, Ravager host. Earth is not a signatory to the Galactic Accord, and we don't recognize your authority to negotiate on behalf of the 200 million beings you've murdered and consumed over the past century." The silence that followed was broken only by the continued explosions of dying Ravager bioships, as the Terran fleet methodically hunted down every last vessel. On the surface of New Harmony, Ambassador Lyrinth and the remaining Melodians watched the battle through their crystal spires with something approaching religious awe. The humans weren't just defeating the Ravagers, they were doing it with a combination of technological superiority and tactical brilliance that made the watching aliens question everything they thought they knew about the nature of warfare. Commander Velos, Lyrinth said, her harmonic patterns showing a mixture of gratitude and deep confusion. What manner of species are these Terrans? Their ships move like they were born for war, but their communications suggest they came here specifically to help us. High resonance. I believe we are witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that has achieved technological advancement through conflict rather than despite it, yet has somehow retained the moral framework to use that capability in defense of others. The truth of Velos's observation became clear when the last Ravager bioship died in a brilliant flash of plasma fire. Its death marking the end of a reign of terror that had lasted for over 3 centuries. The silence that followed was profound for the first time in living memory. This sector of space was free from the threat of Ravager predation. Admiral Rodriguez's image appeared on the communication screen in the central spire, her weathered face showing satisfaction mixed with something that looked almost like sadness. Ambassador Lyrinth, the immediate threat has been neutralized. Our medical and engineering teams are standing by to assist with humanitarian relief and reconstruction efforts. Admiral, Lyrinth's harmonic voice carried notes of profound gratitude. Your species has saved not just our lives, but our entire civilization. How can we ever repay such a debt? Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Ma'am, in my experience, the best way to repay a favor like this is to pass it forward. Help the next species that finds itself in trouble. Share your music and your art with anyone who wants to learn from it. And if you ever encounter another species that's facing extinction at the hands of bullies and predators, don't hesitate to call us. You would do this again? Risk your ships and your people for strangers? Ambassador, let me tell you something about humanity. We spent the first 4 billion years of our existence learning how to survive on a world that was actively trying to kill us. Everything from the bacteria in our water to the largest predators on our continents saw us as food. We learned to fight, to adapt, to never give up, and to never leave our people behind. Rodriguez gestured toward the view screen, where Terran ships were already beginning humanitarian operations, their shuttles carrying supplies and medical personnel to the planet's surface. But somewhere along the way, we also learned that the strongest thing you can be isn't the biggest predator in the forest. It's the one who uses that strength to protect those who can't protect themselves. Your distress call didn't just ask for help. It showed us beings who had spent their entire existence creating beauty, facing extinction at the hands of creatures who knew only hunger and violence. She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on an intensity that made the crystal spires resonate with sympathetic vibrations. There was never any question about whether we would come. The only question was how fast we could get here. Over the following weeks, the galaxy watched in fascination as the Terran fleet carried out what they called humanitarian operations, with the same ruthless efficiency they had shown in combat. Engineering teams that could repair Melodian crystal technology using principles the aliens didn't even understand. Medical personnel who worked tirelessly to heal both physical and psychological trauma. And most importantly, scholars and artists who sat with Melodian survivors to learn their songs and ensure that their culture would not be lost. But it was the intelligence reports that truly shook the galactic community. The Terran fleet had not just stumbled across the Melodian distress call by accident. They had been monitoring subspace communications across a radius of hundreds of light years, listening for exactly these kinds of situations. Earth, it seemed, had been preparing for this moment since they first detected signs of intelligent life among the stars. The final revelation came when Ambassador Lyrinth was invited aboard the Times, Unconquered Times, for a formal ceremony marking the beginning of diplomatic relations between Earth and the Melodian survivors. As she walked through the corridors of the massive vessel, she noticed something that made her crystalline form flicker with wonder. The walls were covered with art. Not human art, but works from dozens of species across the galaxy. Paintings, sculptures, musical compositions, poetry translated into hundreds of languages. Each piece was carefully preserved and displayed with reverence that spoke of deep appreciation for beauty in all its forms. Admiral Rodriguez, she asked during the ceremony. "How did you acquire such an extensive collection of galactic art?" "Your species is new to interstellar travel." Rodriguez smiled, the expression carrying all the warmth of someone sharing a cherished secret. "Ambassador, we've been listening to the galaxy's radio transmissions for over a century. Every time a civilization broadcast their art, their music, their stories into space, we recorded it. We studied it. We learned from it." She gestured toward a particularly beautiful Centaurian light sculpture that pulsed with colors that had no names in human language. "We knew that someday we would meet our neighbors among the stars. We wanted to be ready to appreciate what made each of them special, to understand what we would be fighting to preserve." As word of humanity's intervention spread across the galaxy, carried by survivors and witnesses to the battle, the response was mixed. Some species saw the humans as potential saviors, beings who might finally bring an end to the predator races that had terrorized the peaceful worlds for millennia. Others viewed them with suspicion, wondering what such a militarily advanced species might want in return for their protection. But in the quiet corners of the galaxy, in the places where artists gathered to share their work and philosophers debated the nature of existence, a new song began to spread. It was a song of hope, the idea that somewhere among the stars, there lived a species that had learned to channel the violence of their evolution into protection for those who could not protect themselves. The humans had arrived, and for the first time in galactic history, the predators were afraid. And in the deep archives of the Terran Defense Force, Admiral Rodriguez filed her after-action report with a note that would become part of human military doctrine. First, contact successful. The galaxy is bigger and more dangerous than we expected, but also more beautiful. Recommend continued expansion of humanitarian fleet operations. There are a lot more people out there who could use our help. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or colonizers, but as the species that answered the call when others cried for help, and they were just getting started. To use, it was the right thing to do.